Hello everyone, tonight we step barefoot into a vineyard where the grapes hang heavy in the twilight, their skins glossy and dark like little lanterns strung on invisible wires. Cicadas buzz lazily in the heat, and the smell of earth rises sharp and damp under your sandals. Somewhere in the shadows of the olive trees, a flute stumbles through a melody that sounds equal parts cheerful and ominous. You can almost feel the air tilting as if the world is about to get tipsy. This isn't your local farmer's vineyard tour. No, you've just wandered into the territory of Dionysus, the god of wine, theater, and all the messy human feelings that people normally shove deep down until someone passes the cup around. And let's be real, if you were dropped here in ancient Greece, expected to keep up with their festivals, their endless ceremonies, and the occasional supernatural apparition, you probably wouldn't last long. Maybe a single night if the wine is weak. But one of those all-night dances in the hills? Yeah, good luck. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I'm doing here. And hey, do me a favor, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly satisfying to imagine this chorus of sleepy travelers, scattered across the world, listening at once. Now turn off the lights, switch on the fan for that gentle hum, and let's settle into tonight's journey together. The vineyard stretches out in crooked rows, vines curling like lazy handwriting across wooden poles. The grapes are fat and purple, ready for crushing, and you imagine the juice bleeding out onto pale feet, sticky and cold. It's quiet, almost meditative, except for the faint laughter drifting closer, the unmistakable sound of a group already one cup ahead of you. And then, as if slipping from the haze of the dusk itself, Dionysus appears. Not the fearsome god you might expect, but a figure with ivy tangled in his hair, robes loose, cheeks flushed as though he's already sampled his own invention. His eyes shine with mischief and something more, like he knows every secret you've tried to bury. When he raises a cup, it isn't just an invitation to drink, it's an invitation to confess, to unravel, to let the grape juice pull words out of you that daylight keeps locked away. Historians still debate whether Dionysus's cult spread first through small villages or if it exploded suddenly in cities, riding on the back of trade and restless youth. But either way, you can sense that the vineyard is more than farmland. It's a stage, a sanctuary, maybe even the world's earliest therapy circle, though with far fewer clipboards and far more ivy. Someone presses a morsel into your hand. At first glance it looks like a raisin, but when you pop it into your mouth it reveals itself as a dried fig, chewy and sweet with a faint crunch of seeds. Sticky sugar coats your teeth and you're told it's good for stamina, though you're pretty sure it's just an ancient excuse to snack between gulps of wine. Still, the fig lingers, grounding you in the swirl of flute music and laughter. You shuffle further into the gathering. A woman adjusts a wreath of ivy on her head, leaves brushing your cheek as she passes. The smell of crushed herbs clings to her fingers, basil, maybe thyme, like the world's most aromatic therapy candle. A man nearby taps the rim of a cup in rhythm, each metallic chime pulling you deeper into the circle. You're no longer just a visitor, you're part of the session whether you want to be or not. Dionysus gestures for the cup to be passed, and when it lands in your hands the wine looks almost too dark, like liquid night. You lift it cautiously. It's watered down, of course, Greeks never drank it straight, but it still carries the weight of heat and sun and crushed time. You take a sip, and the warmth spreads instantly, like a secret crawling through your chest. It tastes of berries, of stone, of something both sharp and forgiving. Around you, confessions ripple. A woman laughs too loudly, then tells a story about her husband that probably wasn't meant for public ears. A man sighs, shoulders dropping, speaking of debts and disappointments, his voice soft but steady. You listen and strangely it feels safe, even though you've just met these people in this ancient vineyard, even though none of them know your name. You realize, this is the point. It isn't just about drinking. It's about loosening the knots. About finding, in the swirl of laughter and figs and watered wine, a kind of group release. Like the world's first therapy session disguised as a party. And maybe that's why Dionysus smiles the way he does, because he knows exactly what you've been holding back and he knows it's about to spill out with the next sip. A breeze drifts through, rattling the vines. The cicadas hush as though the night itself is leaning in to listen. And you, fig sweet and wine warm, realize you've crossed a threshold. You aren't standing in a myth anymore. You're inside it, woven into the story like ivy on a trellis. The vineyard dissolves behind you like a dream you half remember after a nap. Your feet crunch on gravel, then on dry grass, then finally on the stone of a hillside path. You're climbing, slowly, almost reluctantly, toward a clearing where the night feels heavier, where the stars themselves seem to lean down and watch. And there, in the middle of the open ground, stands a curious circle, stones arranged in a ring worn smooth by hands, knees, and maybe the weight of more emotions than you could ever count. You sit on one of the cool stones, noticing how the air hums, not just from the crickets this time but from voices gathering again. Except this isn't a vineyard anymore. This is a thiosos, one of those wandering groups dedicated to Dionysus. You can tell because of the energy. It's part festival, part therapy, part group project nobody signed up for but somehow everybody keeps showing up to anyway. Someone passes a basket your way. You peek inside and find not grapes this time but honey cakes, little discs of wheat and sesame, sticky with golden sweetness. You bite into one and it crumbles gently, the honey oozing onto your lips. It's both breakfast and dessert at once, which feels appropriate, since no one here seems to care what time it is. Ancient Greek timekeeping was, after all, less about hours and more about moods. And right now the mood is confessional with a side of sugar. The leader of the group, an older woman draped in a saffron shawl, taps her staff against the earth. Instantly the chattering quiets. She raises her voice but it isn't stern, it's warm, encouraging like the world's gentlest group moderator. She asks who will share tonight. The silence that follows is thick but not uncomfortable. Everyone is waiting, eyes flicking from face to face. And then, finally, a man with tired eyes begins to speak. He talks about the war. Not in the heroic, statuesque way you see carved in marble, but in the blunt exhaustion of someone who has carried too many shields, buried too many friends. He doesn't cry. He doesn't need to. His words fall like pebbles into a still pond, and you feel the ripples through the circle. Historians still debate whether these gatherings were meant to be therapy or whether they were simply religious ecstasy that incidentally helped people unburden themselves. But as you sit here, chewing on honey and sesame, you can't help thinking the difference doesn't matter. When someone finally says aloud the thing they've been holding in, and the group listens without judgment, that feels like healing no matter what the scholars call it. The woman beside you leans over and whispers a joke, breaking the heaviness just enough. "Better here than shouting it in the agora," she says, rolling her eyes. You laugh softly, nearly choking on the crumb of cake. There it is, the balance. Sorrow shared followed by relief. Pain let out followed by sweetness. It's basically group therapy but with snacks and moonlight. Honestly, you're starting to wonder why modern clinics don't serve honey cakes. When the next person speaks, it's not about war but about love. The wrong kind, the kind that curls and twists like ivy, clinging to someone who doesn't notice. The group hums in sympathy. You notice Dionysus at the edge of the circle now, half shadow, half light, watching with an expression that's both playful and deeply serious. His presence feels like a mirror tilted toward you, reflecting all the hidden corners you'd rather ignore. Someone claps the speaker on the shoulder and laughter breaks out again, warm and easy. Another basket appears, this one filled with roasted chickpeas, salty, crunchy, the kind of snack you can't stop eating once you start. You toss a handful into your mouth, grateful for the simple grounding sensation, as though the chickpeas tether you to the earth while emotions swirl all around. The circle continues, one confession at a time. A mother admits how tired she is of being strong. A boy admits he wishes he were braver. You realize you're nodding as if you're part of the session. And maybe you are. Because sitting here in this timeless stone circle, you feel your own knots tugging loose. That one worry you've been carrying, the one you never voice aloud, it pushes closer to the surface with every shared story, every crumb of honey cake, every echo of laughter. Above, the stars blink. The moon tilts higher. The hillside air smells of time crushed under sandals, of wine staining skin, of lives unspooling in words. And when it's finally your turn, the silence wraps around you, expectant but kind. You take a breath, tasting the salt of chickpeas still on your tongue, and you realize, maybe this is exactly where you needed to be all along. The circle dissolves slowly, not like it ends, but like it stretches thin across the hills and fades into the horizon. You stand, brushing crumbs of honey cake and chickpeas from your hands, and begin walking. The path winds through olive groves, their silver leaves shimmering as though the moon has dipped its fingers in quicksilver. You keep moving, your feet bare now, the stones surprisingly warm from the day's leftover sun. And then you hear it, laughter sharp and rolling carried on the night air. Not the gentle chuckles of the circle but the booming sound of men already deep in their cups. You come upon a courtyard lit by oil lamps, their flames dancing in bronze bowls. A symposium is underway. This is where philosophers, poets, and politicians collapse into a pile of words and wine, competing to outwit each other, sometimes with wisdom, sometimes with nonsense. You hesitate at the doorway, but someone waves you in, thrusting a kylix into your hand. The bowl is shallow, awkward to hold, painted with little black figure scenes of satyrs doing things that would never make it onto your high school history syllabus. You take a sip, watered wine, but still strong enough to singe the edges of your thoughts. The air is thick with roasted meat, cheese, and, strangely enough, figs stuffed with walnuts and dipped in honey. They're chewy, sticky, and absurdly sweet, a dessert that seems designed less for hunger and more for bragging rights. Look at me, I've got enough honey to drown a philosopher. You bite one, and it glues your teeth together so firmly you nearly miss the next round of debate. One man, beard flowing, argues that life itself is suffering, and the only way to transcend it is through reason. Another interrupts, declaring that no, the gods made wine so humans could forget suffering, not argue about it. The room breaks into laughter, and then someone starts singing a hymn to Dionysus, off-key but with such conviction that nobody minds. You find yourself humming along, sticky-fingered, slightly dizzy, feeling both out of place and exactly in the right place. Historians still debate whether the symposium was a serious intellectual arena or just an excuse for elite men to drink too much and show off. Probably both. You notice how the arguments circle around but always return to the same things: love, loss, pride, and what it means to be alive. It's basically a podcast episode with no editing, no sponsors, and way too much honey. At one point, a young man stands and announces dramatically that he will recite poetry. Everyone groans but claps anyway. He begins with Homer, slips into something suspiciously self-written, then loses his thread entirely and starts listing all the girls who've ignored him. The crowd erupts in sympathetic laughter. Even you chuckle, wine sloshing dangerously close to the edge of your cup. Dionysus, of course, is here too, leaning against a column, grinning like the world's most indulgent host. Every time the conversation dips too far into despair, someone cracks a joke, or a tray of figs arrives, or a flute begins to play. The rhythm of it is unmistakable. Revelation, snack, argument, laughter, repeat. It's therapy disguised as debate disguised as chaos. The night deepens. A man in the corner starts strumming a lyre, and voices rise in song. You realize the symposium isn't about winning arguments, it's about weaving everyone's thoughts into a single messy tapestry. Each opinion, each crumb of walnut, each splash of wine, threads pulling together until you can almost see it shimmer in the lamplit air. And as the singing swells, you let your head fall back, the taste of figs still clinging to your tongue, the arguments and laughter blending into a strange lullaby. For a moment you feel the group carrying you, lifting you into something larger than yourself. Something that isn't just philosophy or myth or therapy, but a reminder that you too belong in the chorus of voices. The symposium doesn't end, it just dissolves much like the circle of worshippers did earlier, blurring into the night as though it had only been a passing dream. You stumble out of the courtyard, head buzzing, body heavier than your steps should allow. The night air cools your skin, olive branches whispering overhead. You expect silence, but instead you hear a new sound, the wild beat of drums echoing from the hills. You follow it. Your path winds upward, stones underfoot turning sharper, more jagged, as if the mountain itself is testing your resolve. The drumbeat grows louder, faster, matched now with the shrill of flutes and the clatter of bronze cymbals. You crest a ridge and suddenly the world bursts open. Torches everywhere, casting light on a frenzy of figures dancing in circles, spinning, leaping. This is no quiet symposium. This is the thyasos, the ecstatic retinue of Dionysus. You blink against the blaze. Women in flowing dresses toss their hair back, crowned with ivy. Men painted with ash roar like lions. Satyrs prance, half-goat legs kicking up dust, tails flicking as they laugh at private jokes no human could quite understand. You're not sure whether to be terrified or to join in, but before you can decide, someone pushes a cup into your hand again. Of course. Always the cup. This time the wine is different. Thicker, darker, unwatered, the kind of drink that doesn't just warm you but coils around your mind like smoke. You sip and the night tilts. The torches blur into golden halos, the dancers double and triple in your vision, and the drumbeat crawls under your skin until your own pulse begins to match it. The feast here is unlike anything in the symposium. Platters of roasted goat, bowls of olives bursting with brine, and something stranger, cheese fried in olive oil and drizzled with honey, gooey and salty sweet, sliding down your throat like a dream you didn't know you had. It's the kind of food that makes no sense at first but then feels inevitable, like yes, obviously cheese was always meant to swim in hot oil and sugar. You take another bite, laughing at yourself forever doubting it. The frenzy spins faster. A woman shrieks with joy, hurling her head back, ivy leaves fluttering down her shoulders. Someone beats the drum harder, and your feet begin to move of their own accord. You dance, or rather, you stumble in a rhythm that might generously be called dance adjacent. No one cares. The energy is contagious, pulling everyone in, wrapping you in a storm of limbs and voices. Historians still debate whether the thyasos was merely symbolic theater or an actual communal release where ordinary people lost themselves in ritual ecstasy. Standing here, you wonder if there's even a difference. Whether staged or genuine, the effect is undeniable. The crowd forgets itself, merging into something primal, a collective heartbeat. Dionysus appears again, not as a distant figure this time but in the center of it all, crowned with vines, eyes glinting like embers. He doesn't command, he simply exists, and the crowd shapes itself around him as though joy itself had taken form. You feel your chest expand with laughter you didn't mean to release, your worries scattered like olive pits in the dust. And then, because nothing sacred can stay too solemn, a satyr trips over his own hooves and crashes into a jug of wine, sending it spraying across the ground. Everyone howls with laughter, even Dionysus himself, who claps his hands in delight. The absurdity only adds to the ecstasy, like a reminder that divine madness and slapstick comedy are never too far apart. Someone thrusts a torch into your hand. The flame wavers dangerously close to your hair, and you realize how completely unqualified you are for fire duty. But then the torches all rise together, a blazing crown around the circle, and the night roars with song. The air tastes of smoke and honey and fermented grapes, a cocktail strong enough to make the stars themselves seem to sway. You don't remember how long it lasts. Minutes, hours, or perhaps a night stretched into eternity. At some point your voice joins theirs, rough and untrained, but no one notices. The hymn builds, the rhythm peaks, and for an instant you feel weightless, as if your very self has dissolved into the collective madness. When at last the drums slow, the dancers collapse into laughter, breathless and shining with sweat. You sink to the ground too, the torch gone, the taste of fried cheese still clinging to your lips. Around you the night is quiet again, the frenzy already slipping into memory, like wine evaporating from a spilled jug. And in the silence that follows you wonder, was this ecstasy a path to the gods, or just a very elaborate excuse to eat fried cheese at midnight? Historians still debate, but you suspect Dionysus doesn't care. For him both answers are equally true. The world doesn't return to normal, it just shifts like the thyasos left fingerprints on the night air. You wake up, if waking is the right word, on the edge of a hillside carpeted in thyme and crushed mint. Your head feels heavy but not painful. More like you've been gently stretched into a shape that doesn't quite fit anymore. You blink at the stars and they blink back, brighter than they ought to be, as if amused that you're still trying to sort reality from performance. A soft trickle of water pulls you downhill. You follow, stumbling through the scrub, sandals snagging on roots. The air cools, damp, carrying the sweet metallic scent of spring water. The path ends at a grove where a fountain bubbles from a stone lion's mouth, filling a shallow pool. It's no accident. You've wandered into a sanctuary, one of those tucked-away holy places the Greeks seem to plant everywhere, half temple, half picnic spot. And here, under the moonlight, the feast continues. But it's not the riotous storm of the Dionysus. This is calmer, slower, like the after-party where everyone has slipped into softer voices. Mats of woven reed line the ground. Amphorae of wine are opened, not splashed everywhere this time, but poured carefully, as though the night is finally ready for conversation. You sit down, your back against a laurel tree, and someone passes you a plate. On it, figs stuffed with walnuts and dipped in sesame honey. Sweet, sticky, ridiculous. You bite in and juice runs down your chin. A stranger laughs and offers you a strip of cloth, as if this is all perfectly normal. Maybe it is. This gathering feels different. People are leaning toward one another, sharing murmured thoughts, confessions. You realize, this is less of a feast and more of a therapy circle, one that Dionysus himself has curated. Wine loosens the tongue, yes, but more importantly it softens the heart. A farmer speaks of losing his harvest to drought. A widow admits she fears being forgotten by her neighbors. A young man stammers through his shame at never speaking to his father before the old man died. And instead of silence or judgment, the group murmurs back comfort, nods, hands pressed to shoulders. It feels startlingly modern. Group therapy in the shadow of grapevines and olive trees. Ancient wellness retreat. You imagine Dionysus with a clipboard and half glasses, but no, he just lounges at the pool's edge, hair damp with mist, smiling faintly, like he knows exactly how fragile you all are and doesn't mind in the least. You take another sip of wine, and the cool spring water beside you sings quietly under the stars. Historians still debate whether these quiet gatherings were genuinely therapeutic or simply excuses for community bonding, but when you sit here with strangers pouring their souls out, it feels clear enough. Healing comes in many costumes, sometimes with ivy crowns. Someone mentions the Pythia at Delphi, the oracle who inhaled fumes and murmured divine riddles. Someone else counters that this circle is different, not about prediction but about reflection. You laugh softly because it's true. The god who brings frenzy also brings calm, a paradox poured into one cup. A satyr wanders by, carrying a jug too large for his arms. He slips, predictably, and the jug tips, spilling half the wine into the pool. Everyone groans. The satyr bows dramatically, apologizing to the lion-headed fountain as though it were a disappointed host. You can't help it. You laugh until your ribs ache, the tension of the confessions breaking like a snapped lyre string. The figs return, passed hand to hand, and the circle breathes together. You feel lighter, as though someone siphoned out your hidden worries and let them dissolve into the night air. The torches burn lower. Crickets sing. You lean back against the tree, sticky-fingered and half-dreaming, wondering whether the therapy was the wine or the laughter, or just the permission to admit you're not carrying everything alone. You close your eyes. The fountain still whispers, the stars still shimmer, but your mind softens into the rhythm of voices sharing grief, sharing joy, sharing silence. You're not sure how long it lasts, but when you drift off, it feels like the gentlest thing Dionysus has ever offered. When you open your eyes again, the air is different, thicker, warmer, humming with music that you didn't hear before. You sit up, and the sanctuary grove has dissolved into something grander, as if the very ground decided to upgrade itself overnight. Columns rise around you, painted red and blue, their capitals carved into curling vines. The fountain is gone, replaced by a polished marble floor that reflects torchlight like a pool of liquid gold. You've stumbled or been nudged into a symposium. The Greek invention of the formal drinking party, half social club, half intellectual laboratory. Mats line the floor, and men recline on couches with a casual elegance that makes you wonder if they practiced in front of mirrors. Slaves circulate, carrying craters of wine mixed with water, because unlike the Dionysus, symposiums had rules. Too strong and the night collapsed into chaos. Too weak and no one felt bold enough to talk. The balance was everything. The first thing you notice is the sound, the steady pluck of a kithara, the reedy song of an aulos. Music sets the pace. Conversations rise and fall like waves against the shore. Philosophers argue about the nature of justice. Poets recite verses, half-dreamed epics about the gods. And in the corner, inevitably, a man is attempting a joke about Zeus that probably won't land but will earn at least a sympathetic chuckle. You're given a cup, broad, shallow, painted with tiny figures dancing around the rim. You sip. The wine is cooler, smoother than what you had in the grove. Someone explains that this is Chian wine, highly prized, diluted with 3 parts water. You nod sagely as though you understand vintage distinctions, even though to your tongue it still tastes like grapes that got a little too excited about themselves. The food is curious too. Bowls of olives, roasted chickpeas, and something unexpected. Dried mullet roe pressed into cakes and dusted with flour. Batarga, essentially salty and pungent, the kind of snack that would get you strange looks at a modern potluck but here earns murmurs of approval. You chew and try not to grimace. A stranger laughs at your expression, slapping your back, assuring you it's an acquired taste. You silently hope not to acquire it. The talk around you shifts into sharper focus. One man declaims loudly about the role of tragedy in cleansing the soul. Another counters that comedy is superior because laughter releases pain more effectively. You sip and wonder whether this whole debate is just a warm-up act for Dionysus himself, who is very much present, reclining casually among the couches. He looks at ease here, less wild than in the hills, more like a host presiding over his own invention. His eyes flicker with amusement as the arguments spiral higher and higher. Historians still debate whether symposiums were genuine philosophical spaces or just excuses for drinking. Someone mutters beside you. You glance at him, a wiry man with ink stains on his fingers, clearly a scribe. He smirks. Maybe both. Probably both. The room bursts into laughter as one guest, emboldened by too much Chian wine, attempts to balance his cup on his forehead. It wobbles, tips, and spills directly down his tunic. He freezes, then sighs. Everyone applauds his failure as if it were the pinnacle of performance art. Dionysus claps along, delighted as though proving his point. Wisdom and foolishness are just 2 shades of the same color. Your cup is refilled. Someone leans in to tell you about the rules of symposiarchs, leaders chosen to decide the ratio of water to wine and keep order. Another guest interrupts, loudly declaring that no one should mix his drink for him. He gulps straight from a jug, coughs dramatically, then collapses onto his couch, eyes rolling. The room roars. The night moves like a tide. More poetry, more laughter, more confessions. Though these are different from the Grove's therapy circle. Less raw, more polished, dressed up in the armor of rhetoric. Still, beneath the words, you hear the same need. To be heard, to be understood, to find a mirror in another person's gaze. Someone challenges you directly. What do you think? All eyes turn. You hesitate, figs and batarga fighting for space in your stomach. You mumble something about how both tragedy and comedy seem necessary, like left and right shoes. For a moment, silence. Then Dionysus chuckles. The whole room follows. Relief floods you like cool water. Maybe you've passed the test, or maybe they just enjoyed laughing at your awkwardness. Either way, the god himself approved, and that's enough. The kithara strums again. A chorus rises. Cups clink. You sink back onto your mat, the voices blending into a warm blur, the torches glowing like sleepy stars. The symposium hums around you, less a party now than a dream where words and wine are poured in equal measure, each sip carrying you further into the mystery of Dionysus' strange therapy. You blink, and the symposium softens like mist burning away in the sun. The torches dim, the laughter fades, and when you look down, the polished marble floor is gone. Beneath you now lies packed earth, damp with dew. You push yourself up, brushing dirt from your elbows, and realize you're standing at the edge of a small theater. Not the grand amphitheaters of Athens, but something humbler, carved into the side of a hill. Wooden benches circle a stage, torches casting thin shadows across the boards. The smell of smoke and figs still lingers, but now it's mixed with the faint tang of sweat and sawdust. You've stumbled into rehearsal. Actors in masks, oversized, grotesque, their mouths wide enough to amplify a shout, pace back and forth. One gestures wildly, declaiming lines that sound like thunder when delivered through the hollow mask. Another mumbles her part, nervous, tugging at the straps of her costume. A satyr's tail, sewn hastily, keeps falling off. You can't help but grin. So much for divine theater. It looks more like a high school play where everyone's pretending not to panic. Dionysus is here too, leaning against the stage frame, eyes glinting. His presence is quieter now, but you sense him in the rhythm of the actors' steps, in the cadence of the chorus practicing their chant. Theater, after all, is his domain. The god of wine and revelry is also the god of masks, of stepping outside yourself to slip into someone else. He seems to delight in watching mortals play at being more than they are. The director, or maybe priest or maybe both, claps his hands calling for silence. He explains to the gathered troupe that this year's festival will honor Dionysus with both tragedy and comedy. Each form has rules, boundaries, traditions. Tragedy to pull the soul taut like a bowstring, comedy to let it snap back in laughter. He speaks of catharsis, a purging, he calls it, as though theater itself is a kind of communal therapy. You nod, understanding the thread. The wild circle in the grove, the thoughtful symposium, and now the stage, all part of the same experiment in healing. Someone passes you a snack from a wicker basket, honey-coated lupini beans. Crunchy, sweet, slightly bitter at the end. You pop one into your mouth, chewing slowly, watching actors run through a scene where a hero begs the gods for mercy. The lines are stilted, but you feel the weight of them anyway. You're not sure if it's the words, the masks, or just the setting, but the performance tugs something in your chest. Historians still debate whether Greek theater began as ritual worship or evolved into art for its own sake, whispers a man beside you, an older fellow with a beard dusted white. His tone is conspiratorial, as if he's letting you in on a secret. You nod again, pretending you're part of the scholarly discussion, though really you're just trying to finish your sticky handful of beans without making a mess. Then the chorus begins, stomping in unison, their chants swelling like a heartbeat. You feel the rhythm in your ribs. It's mesmerizing, hypnotic, and maybe a little ridiculous, grown men stomping around in masks with papier-mâché noses, but also powerful. You imagine a whole city gathered here, thousands watching, breathing, crying, laughing together. Therapy by spectacle. A commotion breaks the trance. One actor, trying too hard to make his lines sound heroic, trips over his own sandals and lands flat on his face. The chorus freezes. A second later, someone bursts out laughing. Then another. Soon, the whole rehearsal erupts. Even Dionysus wipes a tear of mirth from his eye. The fallen actor, red-faced, rolls onto his back and mutters something about cursed straps. You laugh too, unable to help yourself. It's the oldest rule of performance. If you can't impress, at least entertain. The rehearsal resumes, ragged but determined. You watch until the torches burn low and the chorus collapses onto the benches, exhausted. Dionysus steps forward, claps his hands once, and for a moment, you swear the air itself hums. The actors, even in their fatigue, straighten. The masks on the stage seem to grin wider. You realize you've witnessed something sacred dressed in silliness, therapy dressed in costume. When the last torch sputters out, darkness folds around you. The stage fades, the benches dissolve, and the chorus's chant echoes in your ears like a lullaby. You feel yourself drifting again, pulled onward to whatever new invention Dionysus has waiting. The theater benches fade from beneath you, and when you open your eyes again, you're surrounded by walls lined with shelves. Clay jars, scrolls, and tablets stacked so precariously you're half convinced the slightest sneeze could level the whole building. The air smells of ink, beeswax, and the faint tang of mildew, exactly the scent you'd expect from a library that refuses to open a window. You brush dust from your fingers, realizing you've wandered into a gathering not of actors or priests, but of scholars. They sit cross-legged on cushions, voices low but animated, arguing about plays, rituals, and the role of Dionysus in civic life. One man jabs a finger at a papyrus scroll, insisting that the origin of drama lies squarely in the dithyrambic songs, those wild choral hymns to Dionysus. Another waves him off, claiming it was civic competition, not worship, that gave theater its form. Their bickering is almost soothing, like intellectual white noise. You sit among them, unnoticed, though you're definitely the only one without a beard or an opinion. A young apprentice hands you something wrapped in a fig leaf, fried cheese drizzled with honey. It's hot, gooey, and frankly the best thing you've had on this whole mythological field trip. You try to chew quietly, nodding as if you're deeply engaged in the debate, though mostly you're just making sure molten cheese doesn't scorch your tongue. Historians still argue whether tragedy was born out of ritual mourning or civic storytelling, one scholar announces with a flourish. You nearly choke on your snack because didn't someone just say that in rehearsal? The thought amuses you. It seems even in ancient times, academics recycled each other's talking points like bad podcasts. Dionysus is here, but he doesn't sit on a cushion. He lounges atop a scroll pile as though the fragile papyrus were a feather bed. His expression is equal parts amused and smug, the look of a god who knows every answer yet refuses to share. Instead, he lets the mortals fight over interpretations like cats chasing shadows. You realize that might be the point. The therapy isn't in the solution but in the endless discussion itself. The scholars pull out props from their shelves, a clay mask with exaggerated features, a ritual cup with painted dancers, even a string of little bells. They pass them around, explaining connections between ritual and theater, between worship and entertainment. Someone claims that masks were originally meant to embody spirits. Another argues they were just practical megaphones. You lean back, licking honey from your fingers, amused at how serious they are about objects that, to you, look like something left over from a carnival clearance sale. At some point, a heated exchange erupts about whether Dionysus' role in tragedy was central or merely ceremonial. One scholar slams his palm against the floor, shouting that without Dionysus there is no theater, only empty stories. Another insists Dionysus was an excuse, a religious fig leaf covering what was always civic competition. The room fills with mutters, sighs, the scratching of styluses on wax tablets. It's like watching a group chat unfold in real life, equal parts enlightening and infuriating. You can't help but laugh quietly. It strikes you that what they're doing is exactly what the god of revelry might want. Not agreement but spirited conversation, fuel for the human need to gather, argue and share. This too is a form of group therapy, scholars venting through debate, releasing anxieties through the safety of intellectual squabble. Your eyelids grow heavy as the voices blur into one another, arguments blending into a lullaby of rhetoric. You catch phrases, ritual function, public catharsis, the essence of tragedy, but they float past like drifting leaves. Dionysus, still sprawled on his papyrus throne, raises his cup to you in a silent toast, his smile faint, his eyes gleaming. The torches flicker. The library shelves bend and twist, their scrolls unrolling into rivers of ink that trickle toward your feet. You're swept along by the current, carried away from the scholar's quarrels and into another corner of Dionysus' grand experiment. The ink river carries you gently until it settles into a space that feels less like a room and more like a dream woven from soft fabric and hushed voices. You blink and there it is, a circle of couches, low tables scattered with wine cups, bowls of olives, figs, and bread so fresh you swear you can smell the oven. Oil lamps glow warmly, casting shadows that dance along the painted walls. You realize you're in the heart of a symposium, the ultimate ancient Greek hangout. Around you, men recline on cushions with casual grace, though you notice their sandals are carefully polished and their tunics arranged just so, because even in the past, people knew the art of looking effortlessly stylish required actual effort. They sip wine diluted with water, each cup poured from a crater as tall as your chest. You reach for a cup and someone hands you a snack, roasted chickpeas dusted with thyme and sea salt. Crunchy, earthy, unexpectedly addictive. You try not to finish the whole bowl before the conversation even begins. And oh, the conversation. It flows smoother than the wine itself. They start with questions of the gods. Who deserves worship, who interferes too much, who provides the best parties. Inevitably, the discussion tilts toward Dionysus. A guest with hair like a lion's mane declares that Dionysus is the god of freedom, loosening chains of fear and expectation. Another, nose pinched like he's perpetually smelling sour milk, argues the opposite. Dionysus only offers escape, not true liberation. You sip your wine and think, yep, sounds like every late-night dorm debate I've ever heard. The room hums with laughter, disagreement, and clever asides. Even the slaves serving wine are listening in, smiling at the more outrageous remarks. Dionysus, of course, is present, but not seated at a place of honor. He's moving around, brushing shoulders, whispering jokes, sparking fresh rounds of banter. Sometimes he refills a cup without touching the crater, the liquid appearing as if by magic. No one questions it. Maybe they're too tipsy, or maybe that's just how the god of wine prefers to blend in, quietly ensuring the evening never loses its rhythm. Historians still debate whether symposia were primarily social events or disguised political forums. One participant announces, raising his cup as if delivering a toast. You nod, amused at the observation. Here it feels like both, therapy session and town hall, gossip circle and philosophical conference. It's messy and human, and you're oddly comforted by how little has changed in 2,000 years. People still gather, still snack, still argue their way toward connection. The conversations shift like tides, from poetry to politics, from myths to music. Someone pulls out a lyre and strums a soft melody, half accompaniment, half background noise. Another recites a bit of Homer with theatrical exaggeration, and the room chuckles. The atmosphere isn't solemn, it's playful, alive, almost buzzing. You imagine that this is how ancient therapy worked. Not one-on-one confessions in a sterile office, but many voices, many cups, sharing burdens until they seemed lighter. Your head feels pleasantly heavy. Not drunk, exactly, but lulled by the rhythm of talk and taste, of questions that have no answers but are still worth asking. Dionysus catches your eye across the room. He doesn't need to speak. The curl of his smile says it all. The wine isn't just drink, the symposium isn't just a party. It's a structure, a ritual of release where laughter, argument, and companionship blend into something strangely healing. You lean back against your cushion, the roasted chickpeas nearly gone, your wine cup half full. The words around you soften into a comfortable hum. Someone is telling a story about how Dionysus once disguised himself as a sailor. Someone else interrupts to ask if he really invented theater. You close your eyes briefly, letting it all wash over you, the noise and the warmth blending into a drowsy haze. By the time you open them again, the couches are fading, the lyre strings dissolving into silence. The symposium melts like spilled wine into another setting entirely, carrying you further along Dionysus' winding journey. Part 10. The room stretches, bends, and then opens up into something altogether stranger. A theater carved from stone, rows upon rows of seats climbing skyward under an endless blue sky. You blink, and you're standing on the orchestra floor, the center stage of an Athenian tragedy. The air hums with expectation. The audience leans forward, fans of woven reeds flicking lazily against the heat. The smell of grilled octopus drifts from a nearby vendor. Apparently, even in the middle of ancient dramatic revelations, people still wanted snacks. You grab a bite, the smoky chewiness grounding you in the present moment. The chorus enters, masks gleaming white, voices rising in a rhythm both mournful and hypnotic. They chant not just lines from the play but questions that sound eerily like ones you've overheard in group therapy circles. What does it mean to suffer? Who bears the blame? Can a community share the burden of one man's grief? You realize that the theater itself is Dionysus' grand experiment, a structure that looks like entertainment but acts like collective healing. You glance to your right, and there he is again, Dionysus perched casually on a stone seat among the spectators. His wreath of ivy catches the sun, but otherwise he looks like just another theatergoer, eyes wide, lips twitching in amusement. You wonder if he's listening to the actors or if he's listening to the crowd. Maybe both. The play builds to a climax, a king unraveling, a city trembling, gods demanding answers that never come. The audience gasps, groans, murmurs in agreement. For a moment, you swear the entire theater is breathing as one organism. That's the trick, isn't it? Pain feels smaller when it's shared across thousands of hearts. You don't even need to talk, you just need to sit in the same echo, the same story. Historians still debate whether Greek theater was purely civic duty, religious ritual, or a sly form of social therapy. You bite into another piece of octopus, the salt sharp on your tongue, and think, why not all three? It doesn't matter what label you give it. What matters is that the act of watching together, of seeing human weakness writ large, leaves everyone a little lighter afterward. Somewhere, a child laughs at the wrong moment, and the sound ripples through the audience like a reminder. Even tragedy can't escape the ridiculous. You smile, thinking of modern movie screenings where people giggle during dramatic death scenes because the fake blood looks too much like ketchup. Maybe the Greeks had their own version of popcorn chuckles. The chorus exits, the actors bow, and the crowd rises in applause, stomping their feet against the stone in thunderous rhythm. You feel the vibration in your chest. It's not catharsis as Aristotle described it, it's something softer, messier, more communal. You're not cleansed exactly, but you're reminded that you're not alone. Dionysus catches your gaze one last time before he disappears into the departing crowd. He doesn't wave, doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence lingers in the emptying theater, in the crumbs of octopus on your fingers, in the echo of shared sorrow turned into something strangely uplifting. As the last spectator drifts away and the stage goes quiet, the stone seats dissolve into a haze of smoke and wine-scented air. The ground tilts gently, guiding you into yet another phase of this long, winding therapy session by way of myth. You land softly, as though carried on the last vibrations of that theater applause, and find yourself in a quieter setting, a symposium. Low couches ring the room, men reclining on pillows, goblets of wine glinting in torchlight. Someone's lyre plays in the corner, delicate strings that sound suspiciously like a lo-fi playlist with too much reverb. You ease onto a couch, adjusting to the sight of Greeks mid-conversation, words weaving around each other like tangled ivy. The wine is already flowing, darker than you remember, almost syrupy. A servant hands you a plate, something called pastili, a sticky bar of sesame seeds pressed with honey, chewy and sweet in a way that threatens to glue your teeth together. As you nibble, the talk around you sharpens into focus. Philosophers debate whether suffering is punishment, enlightenment, or simply the price of being mortal. It feels less like a party and more like an early version of group therapy with way better snacks. You notice how the conversations move. One person confesses, another responds with a story, another offers a sly joke that makes everyone laugh. Even here, with their best robes and sharpest arguments, the vulnerability slips through. A general admits to nightmares of battle. A poet confesses to being terrified of silence. One man awkwardly overshares about digestive problems, earning the ancient equivalent of an okay, too much info bro eye roll. And yet, the circle holds. No one leaves. Historians still debate whether symposiums were mostly about politics, intellectual sparring, or just an excuse for marathon drinking sessions. You sip cautiously, the wine both warming and heavy, and think again, maybe it was all of the above. A civic function, a religious one, and a psychological one. Dionysus blurring the lines, letting wine loosen tongues so truths could stumble into daylight. The air thickens with laughter and song. Someone claps, someone else spills a goblet, and Dionysus himself appears, not grandly, just sidling in like he's been here all along. He tips his cup toward you, eyebrows raised as though asking, so, what do you want to share? You almost blurt something ridiculous like your unresolved issues with snack portion sizes, but instead you stay quiet. The silence is accepted. That's the magic here. Whether you speak or don't, you're still part of the circle. The lyre strings shift to something more somber, and the group leans into heavier talk. Betrayal, lost love, fear of aging. One man murmurs about how he dreads the day his beauty fades, the room hums with agreement, and you realize you're hearing the same insecurities that could be posted on any modern forum, just with more tunics and fewer emojis. Someone even attempts a joke about wrinkles, which falls flat but still breaks the tension. The conversations weave around you, words and laughter spilling like wine across the room. You chew another piece of sticky sesame bar, and for a moment, you feel suspended in the gentle absurdity of it all. A room full of humans, ancient yet familiar, trying to talk themselves into peace. The torches burn lower, the couches blur, and the symposium dissolves as if someone blew out the entire room like a candle. All that lingers is the faint taste of honey and the sense that maybe you've just sat in on history's longest group session disguised as a drinking game. The torchlight fades and you're somewhere else again, outside this time. The air is cooler, night wrapped around you like a heavy wool cloak. You're on a hillside looking down over a wide Greek plain. The stars seem too close, like they've leaned in to listen. People gather in a rough circle here too, not nobles reclining but farmers, herders, and ordinary villagers. There's no polished marble, no silver goblets. Just clay cups, wooden bowls, and a fire crackling in the center. They pass around something unusual, roasted chickpeas mixed with herbs, crunchy and surprisingly satisfying. Someone tosses you a handful and you nearly drop them because, honestly, they're hotter than expected, like ancient popcorn but way more stubborn on the teeth. You bite carefully, wondering how many dental emergencies Dionysus might have indirectly caused. The villagers aren't debating metaphysics, they're sharing troubles. A woman speaks about a sick child, her voice wavering. Another man confesses he fears his crop will fail. An older shepherd admits he's lonely now that his children have moved away. Each time the others nod, murmur reassurances, or offer help. You realize this isn't just venting, it's collective therapy, the kind where you leave carrying each other's burdens instead of shouldering them alone. Historians still debate whether Dionysian gatherings were mostly wild intoxication or if they contain these quieter, supportive moments. Maybe both existed side by side. One part wild abandon, another part emotional refuge. Like a festival with an after-party and a support group all rolled together. As the firelight flickers, someone raises a jug of diluted wine and makes a toast. Not to gods, not to kings, but to one another. The cup passes hand to hand, and when it reaches you, your reflection wobbles in the dark liquid. You hesitate, then sip. It tastes earthy, rough, but oddly comforting. The group begins to hum, then chant, their voices blending into a steady rhythm. It's not polished music, it's closer to a lullaby sung off-key by tired parents. But it works. The sound vibrates through you, quieting your restless thoughts. You think of modern group therapy circles, of 12-step programs, of late-night heart-to-hearts over coffee, and you see the thread stretching all the way back here. Then Dionysus arrives again, not with a grand entrance, but as a simple figure among them. He looks no different from the villagers, except that everyone unconsciously leans toward him. He doesn't command, he doesn't lecture. He just listens. You notice how his presence makes people braver. Stories spill faster, tears come easier. He's not promising to fix anything, just to hold the space. You shift on your rock, realizing the irony. The god of chaos is also the one who gives people the courage to untangle their own inner chaos. You snack on another stubborn chickpea, nearly crack a tooth and stifle a laugh. Somehow, that little crunch feels like the most sacred sound of the night. The fire dwindles to embers. People begin to lean against each other, voices softer, eyes heavier. You feel yourself sinking too, lulled not by spectacle but by the rhythm of shared humanity. The circle blurs, and all you carry with you is the faint taste of herbs, the warmth of the group, and the soft knowledge that people have always needed each other in exactly this way. You wake to the scent of pine smoke, faint and lingering, and the feeling that the ground beneath you is shifting. No, not the earth itself, it's the setting. You blink and suddenly you're in a bustling Greek town during a festival. Stalls line the street, and everyone seems to be holding either a jug of wine or a snack. The snack that catches your eye tonight? Honey-drenched figs skewered on little wooden sticks. They're sticky, messy, and if you don't watch out, they'll glue your fingers together for eternity. You lick your thumb instinctively and realize, this is a dangerous food for anyone wearing white linen. The streets echo with laughter and music, but tucked away behind the market is another gathering. It's quieter than the main festival, though you can still hear the drums in the distance, like a heartbeat that won't be ignored. Here, people sit in a semicircle, and Dionysus once again makes his entrance, not by bursting in with fanfare, but by leaning against a post, smiling as if he already knows everyone's secrets. This isn't worship in the sense of statues and incense. It's more like a workshop but without the awkward icebreakers. Someone admits they feel like they don't belong in their family, and heads nod in empathy. Another complains about how oppressive city politics have become. Then, in a particularly bold move, A young man announces he's terrified of dying. The silence that follows isn't uncomfortable, it's heavy with understanding. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were political resistance disguised as ritual or actual therapy sessions disguised as partying. Maybe both. You can't help but imagine someone scribbling minutes of the meeting like, Agenda item number 3, existential dread. Wine circulates, watered down as always, because the Greeks weren't about to waste good therapy on someone blacking out after 2 cups. The figs make another pass around, and now they're even stickier, clumping to your palm like emotional baggage you can't quite wash off. You grin despite yourself because the metaphor is almost too obvious. You notice how the group shifts. Someone starts laughing, another person tells a story about tripping over their goat in the dark, and the tension eases. The mix of sorrow and humor feels familiar, like the balance between crying in the bathroom and making memes about your life 15 minutes later. Somehow humans haven't changed much. Dionysus doesn't solve their problems, but he shows them they aren't alone in them. And maybe that's the point. Therapy with wine isn't about erasing the chaos. It's about holding it gently in your sticky honey-coated hand and realizing everyone else is just as messy. The drums outside grow louder, pulling you back to the festival. But for now, in this quieter corner, you sit among them, licking honey from your fingers, listening to strangers who feel like friends, and sinking deeper into the rhythm of their voices. The air tonight feels heavier, not unpleasant, but weighted the way a blanket does when you settle in under it. The festival has shifted into late-night mode. Fewer parades, more whispered conversations, more people slipping away into shadows with wine cups still in hand. You wander, tugged along by the hum of flutes, until you find yourself in a dim courtyard lit by torches. Here, a different kind of circle has formed. No grand amphitheater, no booming speeches, just a low fire in the center with people leaning in, knees almost touching, their faces flickering orange and gold. It feels private, intimate, like you've accidentally crashed a sleepover where everyone forgot to bring pajamas. At the head of the circle sits Dionysus again, except he doesn't sit so much as recline, perfectly at ease as if the stones were made for his back. He doesn't command attention. He absorbs it the way a sponge takes water. When someone speaks, his gaze locks onto them like they're the only person in the world, which is both comforting and a little intimidating. Like therapy but with divine eye contact you can't escape. A woman with hair braided in gold thread admits she hates her husband's family, loudly, without shame. The group erupts in laughter, not cruel, just knowing. Another man confesses he's terrified that his crops won't grow this year, and you can practically hear the anxious heartbeat in his voice. Wine cups pass again, and this time the snack of choice is roasted chestnuts. They're hot, almost too hot, burning your fingertips if you grab too quickly. But the sweetness inside is worth the sting, just like the stories being shared. There's a rhythm here like waves. Someone bears a fear, the group sighs, nods, sometimes laughs. Another tells a joy, and suddenly everyone claps their hands, wine splashing like confetti. Then the cycle begins again, as natural as breathing. The fire crackles, and the night feels suspended, time slowing down as if Olympus itself hit the pause button. Historians still debate whether these late-night rituals were religious ceremonies or social experiments. Were people worshipping a god, or just using his name as an excuse to finally talk about the things that gnawed at them? You suspect the truth sits somewhere in between, hidden in the cracks like the last roasted chestnut you nearly dropped into the fire. You lean back, pressing your hands against the warm stone, and notice how your own heartbeat has matched the rhythm of the group. You feel the urge to share something too, not because you plan to but because the circle pulls it out of you. That's the secret here. Not miracles, not magic, but the simple gravity of being heard. The fire pops, embers floating up into the night like tiny red balloons, and you realize how much lighter the courtyard feels compared to when you first stepped in. Everyone here has spilled a little bit of themselves into the circle, and somehow the weight is shared evenly, no one left crushed beneath it. You lick chestnut crumbs from your fingers, your lips sticky with wine, and let yourself sink into that weightless comfort. The music from the festival fades, but the murmur of voices here is steady, like the world's gentlest lullaby. You could stay forever, or at least until the chestnuts run out. The torches have burned low, and the courtyard feels softer now, as though night itself has tucked everyone in under a velvet canopy. You're still in the circle, but the voices around you have slowed, thickened, mellowed into something more like murmurs than speeches. It's the final act, but not in the loud, triumphant way you might expect from a god of festivals. No, this ending is quieter, almost whisper-like, as though Dionysus is orchestrating a gentle landing instead of a dramatic curtain call. He stretches out lazily, his cup dangling from his fingertips, wine sloshing but never spilling because of course it doesn't. He looks at each person in turn, and when his gaze lands on you, it lingers, calm and steady. You feel yourself exhale, realizing you've been holding air in your lungs for far too long. A man with salt-crusted hair confesses that he's terrified of storms at sea, and everyone nods like it's the most reasonable thing in the world. A young woman admits she sometimes sings to herself while weaving, pretending she's in a chorus of muses. A boy, barely old enough to drink, blurts out that he's scared he'll never live up to his father's name. No one laughs, no one mocks. Instead, they clap him on the shoulder and offer him another roasted figure. Yes, figs this time, their sweetness sticky and stubborn, clinging to your fingers even as you try to wipe them clean. You nibble one, the syrup coating your lips, and you realize the food at these gatherings has always been the same: messy, impossible to eat without commitment. You either go all in or you look ridiculous trying to keep your hands clean. Just like the confessions themselves, half measures don't work here. You either share or you sit outside the circle. Tonight you're inside. Historians still debate whether Dionysus truly intended this as therapy, in the way modern ears might hear the word. Some argue it was merely ritual, another layer of worship woven into the fabric of Greek life. Others insist these gatherings were revolutionary, the first flicker of what we now call support groups. Either way, it's undeniable that something powerful happened here. People left lighter than they came in. You glance around the circle one last time. The embers glow low, red as sleeping eyes, and the voices have softened into drowsy laughter. The night is ending, not with a roar but with a sigh. Dionysus finally speaks, his voice lower than before, smoother, like the hush of waves against the shore. You can't remember the exact words even as you hear them, but the meaning sinks in anyway. You are not alone. The circle breathes together once more and then it dissolves. People rise, stretching, yawning, shuffling into the darkness with their burdens somehow lighter, their hearts a little less jagged. You linger, feeling the stones warm under your palms, the sweetness of figs still on your tongue. You stand, slowly, and the night folds around you like a blanket. The festival beyond is nearly silent now, only the faint echo of a flute drifting through the air. You walk away, steps heavy but mind quiet, as though Dionysus himself has placed a hand on your shoulder and whispered, "Rest." And maybe you will. Maybe tonight, your dreams will be soft, stitched together with laughter, figs, and firelight. The fire fades in your memory, its embers soft, glowing, already drifting into the dark. You carry the echo of the circle with you, the sound of laughter low and steady, the rhythm of voices sharing fears and joys, the sweetness of figs on your tongue. It feels lighter now, doesn't it? The night no longer heavy but softened, like a blanket pulled over your shoulders. Your footsteps blur in the dust as you walk further from the courtyard, but you don't need to look back. You know it will always be there, in some corner of your mind, the circle of warmth where stories float as easily as wine. The god of theater, of madness, of joy and grief alike. He has given you this gift, not loud, not overwhelming, but quiet, steady, reassuring. The world slows down here. Each breath is longer, each blink heavier, the night folding itself gently around your body. You feel the weight in your limbs, not unpleasant, but comforting, the way earth cradles roots. You let it pull you downward, steady and safe. The murmurs fade until they are only hums, then whispers, then silence. You are left with the simplest truth. You are not alone, not in fear, not in laughter, not in the quiet spaces between. The stories of gods and mortals have wrapped themselves around you like lullabies, each one softer than the last. And now you can let go. Let the day dissolve, let the noise fall away, let yourself sink into the slow rhythm of rest. The circle waits for you always, but for tonight, your journey has found its pause. Good night, my friend. Sleep well and let the dreams carry you gently home.